Hello everyone, Shen Thomas here. So we're breaking down the 8 element stances, or what I call the the 8 stances of Shaolin as they relate to each element in the 8 elements. Okay, so they're the 8 most common stances that we use in Shaolin Kung Fu. Okay, and so this next one is sometimes called Mao Bu, cat stance, or Zhu Bu. Sometimes there's a Zhu Bu that's the empty stance that's lower, right? But what we're talking about is kind of a narrow forward stance, okay, where the back leg is 45 degrees, the front leg is pointed, has no weight, and there's a little bit of bend in your legs, not much, but you're definitely not straight, right? Your legs aren't straight, you're coming down just a little bit, so it gives you a little bit of root for being such a narrow stance, right? And so in our Shaolin, we would use like a little side block and kind of do this little stance shift change, right? In what they would call cat stance, okay? But as far as how we use it with the 8 elements and how it transitions, okay, is we might start off coming down into Mao Bu, right? And then when we shift and change all of our weight, we'll bring that up into that cat stance, okay? So any of these stances that has a weight on the back foot, then we can easily and readily kick, okay, from that stance. And part of the reason why both cat stance and empty stance are used is basically to be able to absorb energy coming back, right? Energy coming in, and to kind of change the direction of that energy, whether it might be to the side or upward, right? And then we'll usually step forward into the Gong Bu, or we'll be in the cat stance and we'll come back down into Mao Bu, right? So basically, cat stance is kind of like an on guard stance that is waiting for energy or the opponent to come in, right? Because we look kind of narrow, kind of vulnerable, and they might step in, with throwing a big punch or something. But then from this little stance, then we'll shoot down into another stance to react to energy coming in, okay? So again, with this cat stance, or I call it fire in the 8 elements, and then that's Li, which is fire, is it actually is kind of separating energy by having some energy moving down and some energy spiraling up, okay? And so it's actually a way to break, somebody grabs both arms, it's a way to come on one side of that and to break one arm free, right? They might still be holding on to one, breaking one arm free. So then when we step in to Gong Bu, the arm that's up here or down here, if it still has a hand holding on, then we're able to pull the opponent into the power of Gong Bu. Okay, so it can be used to break grabs or to separate that energy. The bottom hand being like the base of the fire, and then the top hand almost being like smoke or the flames that are billowing up, right? So then that's how I see that as being fire, because it has a narrow base, but it has flames that are moving upward, okay? And so then that is the Li stance, or sometimes they'll call it Mao Bu. Sometimes you'll see it listed as Zhu Bu, but it's basically the narrow stance, 45-degree angle with one foot, toe pointed, both knees bent just a little bit, and usually the hands are out as a guard, okay? And you'll usually see that stance after an attack, then they'll come back and reset into that. So they might kind of turn and get out of the way of something, use Gong Bu to hit, and then come back to control or to put a guard up. And sometimes it might even be like a type of Chi-Na where they might capture an arm and then move up into that as like a type of lock, where they'll have one arm captured and they'll move up on the outside of that elbow as like a type of Chi-Na, right? To kind of grab and lock the arm. And then of course they can step through the person and project them, right? So anyway, fire or Li, Mao Bu, then I'll start connecting it to the other stances, and I might start off with that, right? And then come down into Mao Bu, and then into Gong Bu, and then back into Mao Bu, right? So Mao Bu, again, is like an on-guard stance. It's narrow, and by putting our weight on the back foot, then the front foot can kick, right? And so usually if we do that, we come back, we'll kick, but then we'll move forward again with Gong Bu. Or we might come back and move forward with Mao Bu. Move forward and come behind the opponent and then shoot back out, right? So anyway, that is Mao Bu, or cat stance, right? Which is here. So it's a lot like, in a way, it's a lot like our Wing Chun, the Wing Chun forward stance. It's a little bit different, but again, it's made so it can kick and basically have a little bit higher stance before it drops the base down to go through an opponent. So thanks again for joining me.